Good day. Um, Very pleased to meet all of you. My name is Joseph Shiami. I am currently the Vice President for Community Relations at St. John's University here in Queens, New York. Uh, I've been at St. John's many, many years in two different roles. The first one for some 27 years as the Director of Financial Aid, and then Dean of Financial Aid Services, and finally Vice President for Enrollment Management. In that latter position, I had oversight over recruitment, admissions, and financial aid. In 1994, I received increased responsibilities as Vice President for Government and Community Relations. And since that time, the community relations part has become so big that that's what I'm doing. And so I do a lot of outreach, assisting the community at large after these many years. During the course of my career in enrollment management, I became president of the New York State Financial Aid Administrators Association, followed then by president of the Eastern Association of Financial Aid Administrators, and finally, in 1987-88, president of the National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators. All these many years, I've seen the programs change and in many cases have become complicated for many people. And so, as a community service, I've done this many, many times. I forget how many, it's been calculated, hundreds of thousands of students that I've addressed at large forums, smaller sessions, and I'm happy, of course, to participate annually with Syosset High School. This is a high school at which I have given talks for probably 40 years of my career, and I couldn't be more proud of the students that you have and of the relationships I've had with your superintendent of schools as well as your entire guidance counselor situation there at Syosset. I find the staff is so ready and willing to help you, your children, sons and daughters, get them through the collegiate processes and get them into the colleges of their preferred choices, and then accommodate them with appropriate advice on financial aid. And so what I'd like to do today is give you an outline of what I'm hopefully going to cover. Number one, I'm going to cover the application forms that you'll be responsible for filling out. And the first and most important one will be the FAFSA. The second one that many of you in some cases will have to do will be the profile form put out by the College Scholarship Service of the College Board. And then we're going to talk about financial need. How do the colleges assess financial need? And in that regard, in creating a budget for the colleges and universities, and then determining your expected financial need, your EFC, so to speak. And that will then leave us with your financial need. It is the financial need that the colleges and universities will then pull together from an assortment of financial aids, namely from the federal government, state government, colleges and universities, private resources. And that will end up in what we call a financial aid package. And obviously, once you finish looking at this particular piece, you'll be able to raise additional questions with the guidance office, and they in turn can always refer a question or two to me in the future. So let me first begin with the application forms needed. I mentioned the FAFSA form and I spoke about the profile form. The FAFSA form, unfortunately, at this time, we do not have in our possession. And this is truly regrettable. But the FAFSA form had been available in recent years as of October 1, but not this year. The Department of Education has changed the FAFSA form from a multi-page application to one that will be only 2 pages. So they're calling it simplified. But in reading something just within the last 24 hours with regard to how the FAFSA form interfaces with national and state financial aid programs, it made a statement that it said that the new FAFSA form simplification is beneficial to most students and expands access to federal financial aid state aid, and grant programs may face challenges. So, what they mean by this is that number one, the form is not available until they're saying December 1. This means that the calendar for filling it out is going to be a bit more compressed than what it had been. Normally, if you were filling it out October 1, you had October, November, December. Now they're telling us it won't be ready until December. So, what is this FAFSA form? The FAFSA form is the free application for student aid. And what happens is that you do this all electronically. And that's the problem with it because we don't have it. But once it does become available and goes live on the Department of Education website, and the high school guidance office will alert you all of the actual date when it becomes available, you'll be able to fill this form out at home. Now, the old form was more complicated. It had something like about 90 questions on it. This particular form is going to be well shortened for you. It'll ask for the basic information of student applicant, full name, full address, social security number, identification, perhaps a telephone number, an email address, and in turn, it's going to ask you, the parent, for much information. However, it will continue the process that it began several years ago by attesting to information that you have filed on your income tax returns. This means that the federal government will be able to verify information that you put on the FAFSA form with your IRS form by you signing off on the application to do so. That eliminates an old process that we had where we at the colleges and universities had to ask you to send us your 1040 form or your New York State 201 form. At this point in time, that's all done electronically by you allowing us to do so. Now, the information that they're going to be checking is always going to be prior year data, meaning that by you filling out the FAFSA form after December 1, they're going to be looking at the 1040, the 201 form that you filled out in 2023, probably not later than April 15th of this year. In some cases, they will be able to go back into the system to verify it even a year behind that, namely 2022. How then does this impact on 2024? Because you'll be filling this out December 1, and your income could change in the coming year. Certainly, once the FAFSA is filled out, it is sent to a processing center. They will then process it, computerize it, and send the results to the student. The student receives what we call a student aid report, a SAR, and on there will be a student aid index. This index tells us about eligibility for the Pell Grant program, and it also tells us eligibility in many ways for student financial aid in general, relative to the expected family contribution. Once the college receives the FAFSA form, they generally check with the admissions office to see if the student is accepted. Now, we know that many of your sons and daughters are already applying for admission to colleges and universities, and this is certainly encouraged so that once the student is accepted, then the admissions office would be checking with the financial aid office to see if the financial aid office received a copy of the SAR, so that once the student gets the computerized results, the colleges that the student selects on the form will equally receive that data. In other words, by filling out the FAFSA form one time in the freshman year, it goes to the processing center, and then relative to the number of copies the student indicates on that form, it will then be sent to the colleges and universities. When the student receives affirmation that it was received and processed, there'll be a second opportunity to add additional schools to that process. And we know that your sons and daughters are shopping around for student financial aid, so we know that this is a normal process in the system. So that's the FAFSA form. In other words, FAFSA is filled out for the freshman year of college. Then in the second year, a computerized form is sent to that same student to upgrade the information based on new income data. And that will go on for year 2, 3, and 4, or in a 5-year program, let's say in engineering, or in pharmacy, it would be a 6-year program. Obviously, then the form would continue all of those years. One of the other issues is that the FAFSA form is the prime form. It is required by most colleges and universities, regardless of what financial aid the student receives at the institution, whether it's used for scholarships or general grants and aid, or activity grants, athletic grants, the whole composite of financial aid. Because when we speak about financial aid, we're talking about scholarship money, grant money. We're talking about money related to loans, money related to the college work study program. So all of these programs fit under the umbrella of financial aid. Now, while the FAFSA is very important, we happen to know that at Syosset High School, there are also many students applying to some high-cost institutions of higher education. As a result, many of those colleges and universities require the secondary form called Profile. Again, Profile is put out by the College Scholarship Service of the College Board. There is a fee for that form. Minimal fee as it might be, there still is a fee, an initial fee, and then a fee for each school that one selects. You can get on the system right now in terms of Profile and probably commence some of that. But you're going to find that the Profile form is going to be very different, very much different than the FAFSA form. The FAFSA form asks you fewer questions. It also does not ask you questions relevant to whether you have a home, when you bought it, what is it worth now, or it will not. The Profile form will ask you questions relevant to your income, not only your income, but savings that you've had, as well as retirement funds. It may also ask you as to monies that you have in your other children's accounts. So the Profile form is going to be more intensive, and it's going to do on a lighter side what I call squeeze more out of us. In other words, it wants to know more about our ability to afford sending our son or daughter to a particular college that requires the Profile form. At the same time, all of those institutions do require the FAFSA. So everybody wants the FAFSA. Everybody should fill out the FAFSA. And then in addition, where the Profile is required, then fill out the Profile form as well. How do you know that the Profile is needed? Usually in the financial aid process of the colleges that you're applying to, they will tell you that the Profile is required. It certainly doesn't hurt to go to the website of each of those colleges that your son or daughter is applying to make sure that the Profile is not required. If it is, my best advice is to make sure that it is filled out. So now that you have an understanding of the two major forms, the FAFSA and the Profile, it is the FAFSA form that we're going to stress and speaking about. Now, under normal circumstances, we would have had a picture of the FAFSA form, and it would have been shown to you, and I might have walked you through it. So for this particular year, we're not going to be able to do that. We obviously are going to make reference to it. At this point in the program, I'm going to explain to you about financial need. Your financial need is something that's brought about through a review of the FAFSA form. And in fact, you see some verbiage up there that I can look at. It says, how much financial aid do you need? And who says so? The federal government uses a formula to help estimate what that is. And the formula takes into account family income, assets, family size, number of household members in college, the age of the parents, and special circumstances such as medical or employment problems. You then send this information to the colleges and government on certain forms, the major form being the FAFSA, and they calculate your expected EFC, expected family contribution. And note that the family includes you, the student income or saving are all part of that. Family means parents as well as student. And of course, the good news that you're reading there, it says whether your dream college costs $7,000 a year or $50,000, the amount your family is expected to contribute, your EFC, stays pretty much the same for all of the colleges. What changes is your financial need, which is calculated like this. And as we look at this example that's there, it says the college costs minus the EFC, which comes from the FAFSA, equals your financial need. So the formula means that you'll have more need at a costly college, and because so, much financial aid is based on need. You may be eligible to receive more aid at certain colleges. And what we gave you are three examples. You can see that at Nassau Community College, the cost at a different school at Nassau Community would be $7,500 a year. But what's not there are all the related expenses in your budget. At SUNY Albany, the overall budget there is projected at $25,890. And then at Lehigh University, we gave you an example of $69,650. Now, if you were the parent and student filling out this FAFSA and it projected that your expected family contribution would be $7,000, then obviously you would see what your financial need would be. $500 at the lowest cost school, $18,890 at SUNY Albany, and at Lehigh University, $62,650. So in other words, your financial need is going to be the difference of the cost at a given school or the budget that we must establish annually, and then subtract that, the EFC, you'll then see your financial need. It is the financial need that we attempt to project and fulfill for a student. By the way, in that first example, Nassau Community College, that is not their budget. That would be their tuition. Their budget probably is about 14 to 15,000 because you've got to add in personal expenses, the amount of money that students pay for their fees and their books, etc. And then there is a home maintenance allowance for the student traveling back and forth to the school in Nassau County. So that financial need is going to increase from the 500 probably more to about 7,500. That's what I'm projecting. So now, how do the colleges meet your financial need? Through a variety of sources of financial aids. And remember, when we speak about financial aid, again, I want to emphasize this because many people become confused about it, saying, well, what are financial aids? They are monies that come from the federal government, the state government, colleges and universities, and private sources. So we're talking about the whole gamut of aids. So now let's talk a little bit about federal financial aid. What does the federal government have? The federal government provides a variety of sources, namely grant money, it will provide work study money, and it will provide loan money. So in terms of the grant money, there's something called Pell Grants, P-E-L-L. The federal Pell Grant program was started back in 1972 when it had a different name called the BEOG program. And the basic grants at that time were very minimal, $472 a year. Today, I'm very happy to say that that has climbed up dramatically, up to an amount of $6,915, 6915. That's the maximum award. So how does one become eligible for a Pell Grant? By filling out the FAFSA form. And in the process of configuring the family contribution, it will determine eligibility. And so your Pell Grant can vary going anywhere from, let's say, $400 a year all the way up to $6,915. And that Pell Grant can be used at any college, university in America, or even a proprietary school that awards a certificate. In addition to the Pell Grant, the federal government provides supplemental educational opportunity grant money. These grants are funds that we receive at the institution, and we provide it to students based on what? Financial need. So, in other words, if you're a student in that third institution that's shown and you have a lot of financial need and you've received a Pell Grant, then it's possible that you might even receive an SCOG grant, a supplemental opportunity grant. In addition to all this, the federal government provides the College Work Study Program. In the College Work Study Program, this is where students work part-time when they're going to school, usually 10 to 15 hours a week. So let's say once a student is registered, they'll go to the HR office, they'll apply for a part-time position, and if they show eligibility from the FAFSA for the College Work Study Program, they may receive a grant. What kind of a grant could they get? Well, if they're working 10 hours a week at $15 an hour, they're earning $150 a week, 30 school weeks in the year. They could pull in about $4,500. That then becomes part of the financial aid package. So again, you have a Pell Grant, you have supplemental educational opportunity grant money, and on top of that, you can have a college work study program grant. That's what we consider it. By the way, the federal government pays 70% of that to the student, and the other 30% comes from the institution. And then the final piece of what the federal government does are all of our student loan programs. And there are multiple student loan programs, but the most important one, of course, is the Stafford Student Loan Program. Now, sometimes the wording on these programs changes, but right now the most important thing that you want to remember is that you're seeking a Stafford subsidized student loan. These are loans that are taken at low rate of interest, and the interest does not accrue while the student is in college. That's if the student qualifies for a Stafford subsidized student loan. The interest rates can rate all the way up to 9%. Happy to say that right now they're hovering between 5 to 6% per year. Usually that percentage rate on the loan varies, and it's announced after July 1 each year. If a student qualifies for such a loan, the loan is repaid over a 10 to 15-year period, and upon graduation, after dealing with the lender, then obviously there are cases where the loan can be paid over even a longer period of time. Now, if a student doesn't qualify for a Stafford subsidized loan, there is the Stafford unsubsidized loan, meaning the student would still qualify for the loan. However, the interest would be accruing while the student is in college, but the loan and the interest, of course, is paid at the end when they graduate from college. So let me share some information about one loan that I do not encourage that much, and that's called PLUS, Parent Loan for Undergraduate Students. This is where you, the parent or family, can go to a lender and take out a loan, and it is a higher percentage rate. The highest it can ever be is 9%, but the problem is it's usually about 7.5, whatever, but the interest on the loan is accruing from the first day of classes, and as a result, it must be paid back immediately, interest and loan, while the student is in school. This then causes a family to have an additional burden while the student is in school. Now, it is true that maybe the student qualified for a subsidized loan, but the family feels they want to take out an additional loan to kind of replace their expected family contribution. And if that happens, then you're going to be burdened with this loan that has to be paid back while the student is in classes. So I personally do not recommend that kind of a loan. I would suggest in those cases that any of you who work for a company or a foundation or a credit union, you might be able to get a student loan at a lower rate of interest with a better plan instead of paying it back while the student is in school. But again and again, I'm giving you the general view of federal financial aid programs. the Pell Grants, the Supplemental Educational Grant Program, the College Work Study Program, and last but not least, this PLUS loan that's available. Now, the state of New York. The state of New York provides very good financial aid as long as one is a resident and one goes to a school in New York State. There's no portability. And the name of the program is the Tuition Assistance Program, TAP. Where does one get that application? It is contained within the FAFSA form. So when the FAFSA form is filled out, automatically data from that form and information on your 1040 form will go back to the state of New York, and there they will configure your eligibility for a TAP award. The TAP awards now have really increased well to, in an annual year, to almost close to $6,000 a year. So, in other words, a student who's got serious financial need gets the maximum Pell Grant and then gets a maximum TAP award, can readily have the tuition, the fees, and the books all covered, let's say at Nassau Community College. That won't be the case at SUNY Albany, or would it be the case at a private college such as Lehigh? And at Lehigh, you would not be able to take the TAP award with you. But we have so many colleges and universities in New York State where the TAP award could be used that we feel that there's no need to have portability. Not to mention the fact that we export as many students from New York State going to colleges, universities across America, we import the same amount from other states. So there's kind of an equalizing factor here in terms of where the students are coming from. But I will mention something to you that that really is an interesting phenomenon, is that the number of students in New York State graduating from high schools and entering college is somewhat on the decline. And as a result, at the end of my talk, I'll talk a little bit more about that, is about the whole financial aid packaging and why colleges and universities now are somewhat in competition with one another, trying to get their freshman classes at the highest level. But let's return to the programs. So we spoke about federal programs of aid. We've spoken about state program, TAP, Tuition Assistance Program. And yes, there are some other New York State programs that if one fit into that category. So for example, if someone was the child of someone who was affected by 9/11, and we know that we read constantly now of men and women who perished not directly during that period of time at 9/11, but maybe they have lived on and they've survived, but they have been affected because of cases of cancer or whatever it might be. We know that New York State is constantly sending out information for those to be assisted who would be the children of those individuals. So that would be another possible opportunity. Also, in terms of other state aid that you would have to find out on your own for students who are disabled, one would have to find out information like that from the Bureau located in Albany. And that one would do on one's own, obviously. Another area of financial aid would be colleges and universities. So what are the colleges and universities doing? They're providing a lot of financial aid because of what I just mentioned, competition. We all want the best students, whether you're an Ivy League school or you're a top-notch school in New York State, or whether you're a SUNY or whether the CUNY system. We all want the best students. As a result, we award scholarships to students based on high academic achievement. And therefore, the student transcript is very important. Maintaining high grades overall, looking at honors classes, looking at advanced placement, looking at anything that shows to us that a student is a strong student. And we all know that Syosset High School has a very strong rating in the state of New York and across the country. So obviously the transcript is going to be looked at to see if a student could qualify for a scholarship. If not a scholarship, how about a strong academic grant and aid? And that's what you always want, are scholarships and grants that are not based on just solely financial need, but academic achievement. And that's why we tell the students to make sure you keep your grades high. But when a student doesn't have a high average or a high standardized test, whether it be the College Board or whether it be ACT scores, at the same time, colleges will award financial need grants, monies based on financial need. And that's something to keep in mind. There's also the whole gamut of athletic grants and aid, as well as activity grants and aid. Let's say if a university or a college has a band and they have competition for that, there might be monies available to the student based on such grants. So colleges and universities have a large pool of money based on their endowment. Those schools that have very high endowments have lots of financial aid available to them. And as I said, it's a competitive process for us. We all want to attract the best students in our classes. The last piece of where financial aids come from would be the outside world. In other words, groups such as the Rotary, Kiwanis, the Knights of Columbus, private ethnic organizations. For example, if one is an Italian American, there are scholarships that are available through the National Italian American Foundation, through the Sons of Italy Foundation, through the National Organization of Italian American Women. Or if one were Irish American, we are sure that there are Hibernian societies that might be eligible. Or if one was a person of color or of another ethnic group, one could certainly check with one's ethnic background to see what might be available. And there are many, many scholarships available. But remember, no college, university is going to put that in your hand. You've got to do some footwork about that. And I would point out that in some cases, many of our young people don't like to write the essays for these scholarship competitions, but they're very, very important. Make sure that if you find out that there is a scholarship that you would like to be eligible for, you apply for it, but complete the process. You submit the transcript, standardized tests, letters of recommendation, and an essay if it were required. So that kind of pulls together all of the programs of eligibility: federal, state, institutional, and private. Now, why is that so important? Because back again to that financial aid abbreviated package you're looking at, let's take Lehigh University, for example. How would the financial aid director there put together the monies that one would need for the 62,000? That's a lot of money. So the first thing that the college financial aid administrator does is to take a look at what can they plug in. And we're very sure that the first thing they're going to do is plug in a student loan. The second thing they were going to look at, see if the student is eligible for a Pell Grant. Of course, here the student would not receive a New York State grant because they're going outside the state of New York. Then at that point, the college would probably take a look and see, is the student eligible for a scholarship or a grant? Let's say in this case, the student was worthy, had very good grades, had a 90% average, high SATs, high ACT. Maybe they would plug in a scholarship of 25,000, something like that. Now you're getting to meet that financial need of 62,000. Let's say you have a student loan of 3,500, the Stafford student loan. Then you have work study of maybe 4,500. Therefore, you've got 8,000, 8,000, and 25,000 from the college. You're now going to have what? Roughly $33,000 all in financial aid. At that point, you still have additional financial need. Rest assured that the college may have its own private loan program before they would recommend a plus grant. So that would be at Lehigh. At SUNY Albany, situation is you need about 18,890. Here, once again, they would plug in the student loan, they'd plug in the work study grant, and possibly a New York State TAP award. So let's say that all adds up to about $10,000. Now, obviously, they would then probably recommend either a plus loan or some other alternative. At Nassau Community College, which, as I said before, their real cost at the given school with tuition, fees, books, and a home maintenance allowance is probably about $15,000. They would need $8,000 there. And there, once again, they would be plugging in the Pell Grant, the TAP Award, as well as work study. So the process of financial aid packaging, that is the last step. So you begin the step by filling out the FAFSA form. It goes to the federal processor. The colleges and universities get the computerized results and the student receives it. At that point, the college checks with the admissions office. The admissions office sees that the student was accepted and then starts to plug in appropriate financial aid through the financial aid office. Then sometime, usually in May of 2024, the student will then start to receive these letters of financial aid packaging. And usually up until May 1, will be able to decide where he or she wants to go to school. In that package letter will be all the elements that I spoke to you about. Now, there will be a case where you won't like what they're giving you. It won't be sufficient. And so one of the things that we encourage that you do at that point would be to sit and write one good letter that you could replicate and send to each of the colleges and universities that your daughter applied to. And then in that letter, you would indicate that, I filled out the FAFSA form or I filled out the profile form and I'm not getting sufficient financial aids. And I really want my daughter to go to your school. I can come up with X, Y, and Z, but I'm short 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. Or bringing to the attention of the school the particulars that affect your lives. So each family has its own special circumstance. Let's say you had a year in which you had good dental coverage, but maybe you had two children that you had insufficient dental coverage for, of let's say $6,000, $8,000. That's a problem. That's something that you might want to explain to the college or university. Or maybe you've got two children going to college at the same time. That had been a consideration in the old FAFSA form. In the new methodology, they're not going to take that into consideration. So why am I encouraging you to write a letter explaining that? Because what you're doing is you're appealing the financial aid award letter you received because it's insufficient for some reason. And as a result, you're sending that letter to the financial aid office where they will then pull the student's file. They'll have all the information, and then they'll take possibly those considerations into view. And the reason that financial aid personnel can do that is because there is something called professional judgment. Professional judgment is kind of like you going to a doctor, where a doctor takes an x-ray and then looks at all the elements in the x-ray to see where the disorder would be. Well, similarly to that, the financial aid office would take a look at the FAFSA form, see the figures that you provided, but now you're providing new additional information based on your particular circumstance. Another circumstance, let's say you've got a child who has a disability and it costs you an extra $100 a week to provide tutorial assistance for that youngster. That's going to be another bill of $5,000 a year. Or as I mentioned before, having two in college or three in college. And in speaking with some of the personnel in Syosset, we do have a situation where there's going to be a mom in a few years. She's going to have somebody each year for 3 years, all following one another. At one point, when the oldest student reaches his junior year, there's going to be 3 in college at the same time. That family is going to have to take that into consideration when they're filing for financial aid. Because remember, you're filling out the FAFSA form, one for each student, right? So each student is being considered on his or her own eligibility. Which raises another good point. How many of you have filed for and saved under the 529 plan in New York State? I can't see a show of hands, but I'm sure that many of you at Syosset have done it. And that's wonderful because the 529 plan is where you started saving from when they were almost born, which is what I always say. We should start saving and have a plan when you're at the hospital to present to you to say this is where you need to start saving money. And many people have done that. The 529 plan helps the student and helps the family tremendously. But when you fill out the FAFSA form and they ask you about other savings, that savings goes under your savings as the parent. The 529 plan is put on the line for parental savings. By the way, you'll find out that the FAFSA is not going to be asking you about your retirement funds. It will not ask you about the value of your home. That will be that other form. But again and again, if your sons and daughters, many of whom I have met over the years, uh, other sons and daughters, obviously, they were going to these high cost schools. So they had to fill out both FAFSA and profile form. And if a school requires it, make sure you fill it out, provide every piece of information. And if you receive insufficient financial aid from those schools, then you have the right to appeal it. You have the right to write the letter and put before them all of the details. Um, I want to end this little discourse on a very positive note. In my many years in financial aid, and I'm proud to say that I've been doing this since 1967. I've been going to financial aid programs either in person. There were many years I would do 40 different programs at high schools. Now I probably go and visit about 8 to 10 schools, or I'll do something online, such as I'm doing with you today. And I can say that the system works. The system works because I've had people come back to me saying, Mr. Shiami, I know that you gave me the advice back in 1985, and I can tell you that my I went through college, you gave me the advice, and now I've become a parent, and my son or daughter went through the process, and it works similarly. They received, whether they received only a student loan or they received a scholarship or a grant, but it facilitated their process through college. And so I know that you're listening to this program because you're interested for the good of your students. Your son or daughter is interested in college. And at Syosset, we know the high percentage that almost every one of them goes either to a 4 year, 2 year program of collegiate study. There's no question here that they want higher education. The real question, the real glue is how do we hold it together with financial aid? So I want to be encouraging to you by saying that the system works. I wish you good luck in all that you're doing. Make sure that on or about December 1, that FAFSA form becomes available. Fill it out. Some parents say, do you think I should fill it out because I might not get financial aid? Don't let that get in the way. Fill it out. It's very important to have it on file at the college or university. Even if a student is getting a full scholarship, most of the colleges will want the FAFSA anyway because they may be able to help with room and board and other financial aid needs. Because again, remember, financial need has to do with the overall budget of the school. We're not just talking about the tuition or the fees of the books. When we talk about the budget, we're talking about tuition fees, room and board, personal expenses, everything. And that best example that's in front of you at Lehigh College shows a budget of 62,000. That happens not to be the highest budget in America, but it is one of the highest ones, and it illustrates a good one. By the way, on SUNY, we have to mention there is the Excelsior Scholarship. What is that about? In New York State, starting several years ago, the Excelsior Scholarship states that after you apply, filling out the FAFSA, and they take a look to see if you're eligible for Pell and TAP awards. Based on what you would be eligible for, the remaining balance, so let's say the tuition right now, the budget, of course, at SUNY Albany is as high as you see, but the actual tuition that one pays there is probably close to 8,000, just the tuition. So when you fill out the FAFSA form and they see your eligibility for Pell Grants and TAP awards, and based on your New York State net taxable income, you might be eligible for an Excelsior scholarship to make up the balance of that tuition of $8,000. Private colleges and universities, on the other hand, in New York State, have created their own scholarship to fill up the balance similar to the Excelsior scholarship. And I know that the school at Syosset does provide information on the Excelsior scholarships, so please read about all of that. Again and again, financial aid is the most important component in the higher education planning process. Financial aid is the glue that holds it together. You could be accepted at 10, 20 different colleges, universities. Bottom line is, what can you afford? How can you afford it? What are the financial aids that bring it together? Having said all that, I wish you good luck, and I know the guidance office will continue to be in touch with you in the ensuing months. And if there are additional questions, the college financial aid office or the college admissions office at Syosset can easily funnel those questions to me. I leave the door open to you. Thank you, and have a great rest of the year, beginning with today, Halloween. Enjoy Thanksgiving and the holidays at the end of the year. Blessings.